She slid the termination letter across the desk with a smile that said more than any justification ever could. One sentence. You're dismissed. One moment, my career supposedly ended. The room smelled of polished wood and cheap confidence. Rachel leaned back as if the world would applaud her decisiveness. She wanted to look brilliant in front of her husband. The CEO, proof she could cut loose the weak and keep the company pure. What she didn't see was the trail of emails, invoices and late-night entries I'd already noticed. In a heartbeat, her triumph became a risk she never imagined, because some quiet records burn brighter than loud accusations. I had been with the company long enough to know its rhythms. The late-night emails, the endless meetings, the polished smiles that hid knives. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't political, but I was thorough. Every project I handled, every report I filed, I kept a private copy. Not out of paranoia, but because in a place where favoritism ruled, proof was the only shield. Rachel, my manager, was different. She wasn't respected for her skill. She was tolerated because of her connection. Married to the CEO, she wore her last name like armor. Still, she wanted more. She craved recognition as the sharp mind who made tough calls. And firing me, someone who quietly outperformed her, was her way of stepping into the spotlight. The meeting was quick. She told me my role was redundant, but her smirk gave her away. This wasn't about performance. It was about performance theater. She needed to look decisive, and I was the sacrifice. But here's what she didn't know. In my files lay patterns. Contracts approved without real vendors. Payments routed to empty shell companies. Rachel may have fired me to prove her worth, but she had just severed the one person too patient, too observant, and far too dangerous to be discarded. The first days after being fired were a blur of anger and humiliation. Friends told me to move on, find another job, let it go, but every time I opened my laptop, my private archive stared back at me. Rows of documents, emails marked urgent, invoices signed without review, all pointing to something far bigger than a petty manager's vendetta. At first, I hesitated. Going against the CEO of a powerful company meant risking everything. But then I replayed the scene in my mind. Rachel's smug grin, her casual dismissal of years of work, her complete confidence that I was powerless. That memory fueled me more than anger ever could. I began piecing the fragments together. Contracts worth millions had been awarded to businesses that didn't exist beyond a P.O. box. Payments were being funneled through subsidiaries that had no staff, no products, just empty names. And every trail, every transaction, circled back to Rachel's husband, the CEO. She wasn't just complicit. Her signature appeared everywhere. She was the rubber stamp that made the fraud possible. I contacted an attorney, careful, discreet. When I laid out the files, he leaned back, eyebrows raised. "You know this could blow the whole thing wide open," he said. From that moment, the wheels were in motion. Investigators called me their key witness. Subpoenas were issued. What Rachel had thought was a clean break, just another employee discarded, was transforming into a storm that would shake her entire world. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, headlines began whispering about accounting irregularities at the company. Then the whispers grew louder. Subpoenas, hearings, executives questioned under oath. And at the center of it, all stood Rachel and her husband. I'll never forget the first public hearing. The same woman who had once smirked while firing me now sat stiff in a gray suit, eyes darting between reporters and attorneys. She was no longer in control. She was a witness, a suspect, and a liability all rolled into one. Her husband, the once untouchable CEO, looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, shoulders hunched, voice breaking as evidence piled against him. Page after page of contracts, wire transfers, and approvals surfaced. Rachel's signature appeared again and again, binding her to the fraud she never bothered to question. The board, the investors, the employees, everyone watched as the empire they trusted crumbled in real time. For me, it wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about justice, watching arrogance collapse under the weight of truth. Rachel had fired me to look powerful, but in that courtroom she was powerless, a pawn exposed on the grandest stage. The silence in the room when the prosecutor read the charges was heavier than any applause could ever be. When the dust finally settled, the fallout was undeniable. The CEO, once praised as a visionary leader, was forced out in disgrace. His name splashed across every headline as investigators closed in. Rachel, the woman who had fired me with such smug certainty, found herself under scrutiny too, her reputation shredded, her career prospects reduced to ashes. And me? I didn't walk away with a fortune or a promotion. What I gained was far more lasting. The satisfaction of knowing that truth had spoken louder than arrogance. My testimony didn't just expose fraud. It reminded every employee sitting quietly under bad leadership that silence isn't the only option. The irony was almost poetic. Rachel had wanted to prove she was decisive and strong, but the only decision she truly made was to hand me the leverage to unravel everything she and her husband had built. In trying to make herself look smarter, she revealed how blind she really was. Now, whenever I pass that old office building, I think about how fragile power can be. One smirk, one careless dismissal, one arrogant assumption. That's all it took to bring an empire down. Revenge didn't come from anger or shouting. It came from patience, from evidence, and from letting the truth do what it always does. Destroy lies, no matter how high they're stacked.